So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite our panel to the podium now. The Minister we've introduced, the Mayor we've introduced. I would also like to introduce Tom Gelibrand, who I mentioned as the Deputy Director, Project Director, Metro Product and Integration, Sydney Metro Northwest, and has over 25 years' experience in strategic planning at the state and local government level, having been directly responsible for the preparation of major infrastructure planning and delivery strategies. Tom's basically running the Metro program in terms of our panel. Mark McCrindle, on my immediate left, is a social researcher with an international following. He's recognised as a leader in tracking emerging issues and researching social trends. As an award-winning social researcher and an engaging public speaker, Mark has appeared across television networks and other media. He's a best-selling author, an influential thought leader, TEDx speaker, and a principal of McCrindle Research. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got an excellent panel. They are waiting to hear your questions. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion first, everybody, just to sort of set the scene. And then we are really interested in your questions. There are some roving mics, Eob. I think we've got roving mics. That's fantastic. Excellent. So we get, we've got kind of big picture sort of stuff, and the numbers kind of sound quite staggering. But I guess we've kind of got to bring them back into reality a little bit. Mark, you've recently conducted the latest PSI survey, which is a Performance and Sentiment Index that we do in the Hills region. Second time we've done it. What is industry telling us from that feedback so far?
Well, the good news is that the results across the 21 different measures have actually all increased since last year. So there's good performance, but there's also good sentiment out there. Now, some of the measures are still in negative territory, but they've improved slightly. So overall, it was some good findings. One of the things we added this year was the Net Promoter Score, and we asked this question: how likely would you, as a local business operator, and I should say that the PSI was filled in last month by many of your businesses, 186 businesses in the area completed the study. How likely would you be to recommend this area as a place to set up and run your business to others? And more than 36% said a 9 or a 10 out of 10 in that. So, and the majority said just a few notches down from that. In other words, people are very engaged with the area. They find the benefit of this area. As we've discussed already this afternoon, it's an area of high growth. Over the last 10 years across the nation, we've grown by 1.6% in population per annum. The Hills has grown by 1.9% every year on average for the last 10 years. So it's growing faster than the national average, larger households than the national average. There's an extra half a person in every household, every dwelling in the Hills area compared to the rest of Australia. 3.1 people compared to 2.6 nationally. Now, sort of a funny way to say it, but you think of a half a person every single townhouse, detached house and apartments, a lot more people.
Some of us trying to get rid of those people in our houses that just seem to want to hang around for a little bit. But anyway, sorry, John.
So it's growing faster. It's bigger per household. We discussed some of the business data. You shared that in the area. A lot of entrepreneurial activity taking place. And so when you measure those three areas, the context of operating your business, which the PSI does, the performance of how you've gone in the last 6 months, and then your sentiment of how you think things will be in the 6 months ahead, all going pretty well. There's a few negative scores, but all going pretty well, certainly compared to 6 months ago.
I suspect I might know what those negatives are. You might as well share them.
Well, the biggest of all, and it's part of our discussion today, and it's hot off the press. It was last month. Many of you filled in the study, and so the final actual report will not be released for a couple of months. But I've got some of the key data, and so the biggest negative of all was in the local infrastructure provision. And so people, business operators in the area are feeling the pain of what is a work in progress. And also business costs was quite high, people feeling the pain of that. And red tape and regulation also was the biggest of the negatives. So I guess local business operators here are saying, we feel confident about the future. We feel that we're performing pretty well. We feel there's a little bit of a few blockages out there that's sort of hindering our performance, and that's what they were.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. That just kind of brings us kind of back to the reality of where we're at now. But I guess what we're trying to do is to still paint this picture of 2025, 2020, and 2030. And what the Hills will look like in that period. Michelle, how does the council see business and the community looking like come 2020, 2025?
Well, thank you, Anthony, for that question. I think looking down the barrel of the future, obviously we're going to see a population that's a lot larger than what it is today. Obviously there's going to be a lot more people that move into this area. Obviously there's going to be a lot of growth, not in terms of population, but also in terms of the local economy as well. And I think we'll see over time that businesses really begin to grow in this area and begin to take off, like they're doing already. I think looking down the barrel of the future for the Hills, I think we'll see an amalgamation with Hawkesbury, which I'm sure somebody will ask me about at some point in time.
I'm sure they
and
will.
I actually see that as a positive thing for our region. It allows us to have a regional approach to growth. It allows us to have a stronger voice with government. Right now the government gets to listen to the voices of 152 councils. Most of them I'm sure are pretty ratty. And I can't blame the government for wanting to go down this path of creating a local government sector which is efficient and is sustainable going into the future. I think the days of local government expecting handouts from state and federal governments is over. I don't think we can rely on governments to get us out of trouble. We have to find ways of being viable by ourselves and sustainable. I also think the days of just going down the path of increasing rates on residents is also gone. So local government has to modernise and it has to change. And I think you'll see that the Hills leads the way in our partnership with Hawkesbury. So I think in the future you will see a strong regional council in this area that works very well with business and has a strong voice with government, which is going to be important in terms of advocating for better infrastructure. And already, thanks to the Minister for Transport, we're seeing infrastructure come out to the Hills. But obviously in the future we're going to see more of that. So I think the area will definitely prosper, and I think in the future you'll see even more businesses wanting to come out to the Hills, wanting to come out to the Hawkesbury and do business right here.
So zeroing in on that point, what is the council doing, or what are the council's thoughts in terms of that attraction, that investment attraction? Obviously, we're getting population growth. Population generates opportunity.
Absolutely, it does. We're seeing more density come out to the Hills. We're seeing that residential growth, which of course is great for business. If you think about creating new communities in the Hills and the new lifestyle that we're going to be offering around train stations, and you think about all the services that those residents are going to require above and beyond what we've already got in the Hills. So you think about hairdressers and doctors and nurses and retail and accountants and, well, it's a family area, so lawyers and all those sorts of things. It's only good news for the Hills. And I think from a regional approach, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think the region could really, it would be big in terms of portraying itself in terms of attracting tourism, for example. The Hills and Hawkesbury do have that rural aspect. We are the rural part of Sydney, really, where the city meets the country. So we do have a lot of opportunities to create tourism opportunities to bring people into the Hills as well and into the Hawkesbury as well to really showcase the area and the region as a whole. So there is a lot of opportunity there for businesses to grow and to expand. I think the Hills is the place to be at the moment in terms of business. The rail, of course, will change the place. It will allow people to get around easily. It will allow business to connect with the rest of Sydney as well. And I think more and more we'll see businesses come out to the Hills, which is exactly what we want to happen. And I think that will happen over time.
That's great. We certainly need that infrastructure to be able to make sure that the traffic declines in proportion to the population growth that moves. But fortunately, we've got the infrastructure that's about to open. We talk about the activation around the train stations and stuff. Tom, maybe you could elaborate. What does that really mean? And we know that there's lots of apartments and dwellings and programs that are coming out there, but paint us a picture of what that might look like.
I can do that, but probably for all those people that are sitting there and you're tired of listening, just think for a second the places that you feel comfortable in. And even though Michelle said that this is the place where the country meets the city, not many people are that comfortable standing in the middle of a paddock. So if we were to build a railway line, think beautiful railway line, trains go up and down, all look good and they've got doors and everything, but the stations are in the middle of paddocks or in the middle of car parks, or they're in areas that don't have activity. Do you want to go to those places? Well, obviously that was a rhetoric question. Of course you don't. You want to go to railway stations and railway precincts that have got a lot of amenity, they've got utility, they've got places where you've got small to large scale businesses. So when we talk about activation, we're talking about railway stations that are busy from the inside out and then back into the suburb. You just asked the Mayor about what Council was doing in terms of facilitating development growth and all those sorts of things. Well, one of the ways that the stations will become active is through cooperative partnerships with Hills Council, and that's what we've got, and that's what we're pursuing at the moment in terms of revisioning and replanning these areas. So there's a lot of activity underway, and again with Gary's department, to replan these areas. You don't just put the railway line in and stand back and watch and think about what's going to happen. Before you put the railway line in, you actually start thinking, well, what utility will this bring? How can we capture that? How can we actually lever off this change to do something bigger and better? You don't need to take my word for it or any of our word for it. Just, again, you'd look outside, you look at what GPT is doing with their development up at Rouse Hill in terms of the way they're looking at their Northern Frame development, how they want to capture the utility of the railway line. What QIC is doing at Castle Hill in terms of the renewal of their shopping centre, that's going to be the best shopping centre in Australia, full stop. I don't think there's going to be any argument about that. They're capturing the value of it as well. So there is development all the way along with major developments. Malfa is buying back into Norwest Business Park. They didn't spend I think everyone knows how much they spent. It was quite a lot of money. They didn't spend all of those millions of dollars. That's right, because they just wanted to put their toe back in the pool of development. They did it because they said, wow, there's a railway station there. There's a whole opportunity there to absolutely rebuild and renew this area to capitalise on it. And by doing that, that's where you get your activation from. But it doesn't just happen naturally. It actually takes a lot of planning and a lot of consideration. You've got to get it right, and we're in the early stages in that if you look at places like Bella Vista where there's going to be a railway station, there's scope for renewal. There are currently vacant areas. There's businesses that have relocated as a consequence of our construction, and those areas will now be renewed and brought to life. So you plan for those, you work with the state government as well as local government, and we will see some fantastic outcomes in and around those station precincts. And as a consequence, there'll be places that people want to go to. They'll want to stay there. They will actually go there not just to catch a railway station, so they'll go there either to do some commerce or to do some recreating and to go to movies, whatever it might be.
And we're talking, what did we say, 60,000 new people or something. What was it in terms of the new dwellings and stuff that
It depends what sort of area you're talking about, but the Department of Planning's done some great work in terms of looking at a strategic view of the corridor in and around Northwest Metro, and they have found that you could easily foreshadow another 30,000 more dwellings. Now, they won't be like standard housing, so there'll be a smaller number of people living in those dwellings, but 30,000 dwellings is a very significant increase in development. And then on top of that, again, the department's foreshadowing that in the order of 50,000 new jobs is something that we can expect, which is, again, if you think about, the city of Sydney, Gary would know more about this, but I think it's in the order of 380,000 jobs, or maybe south of 400,000 jobs. 50,000 new jobs in and around Northwest Metro is huge if you compare it to something like the CBD. So the scale is really significant.
It really is incredible. All those people need to eat. They want to go out to restaurants. They need to go to the supermarket. They need to do what they need to do. They need to start businesses. They need to find suppliers. Those are the opportunities.